As you've probably been in our, shoes when you're exploring all the different schools. One of the big words you hear everyone talk about community. What makes the Chicago City community unique, and why did you choose Chicago City?
Yeah, for us it was so twofold because our girls were so little when we were going through this process. I had a unique school selection because I'm divorced. I share custody of our 6-year-old with my ex-husband. We had joint decision making on everything, so we went to 20 schools before we decided on the schools. We really went for it, diligence-wise, across the board. And City Day, the quality of the kids we met and our interactions with them, and you see it here, but the 8th graders would say, "Hi, it's so nice to meet you. How are you?" And they're like, "I don't know adults who are that professional." On the one hand, the emphasis on public speaking and developing confidence from such an early age was really important, and the experiential learning across the board, that every single thing that our child or children were learning was going to be applied and across disciplines. We know how critical that is as adults when you get into the real world, and that was a huge motivator for us, and then the reinforcement around the community.
Yes, my story is a little bit different. Back in probably 2 years ago, we were in the situation where my family was residing in Naperville. And it's such a nice area. I mean, you want to grow your kids and also educationally speaking, but then COVID came. And the quality, even though it's no one's fault, no one was prepared for something like that. We were in the situation that my oldest son was asking for extra support. He was going to the system and saying, "Can I have more homework? Can I have more?" Because he was always academically guided and oriented. Sadly, they didn't have the resources. I mean, he came one day crying, saying, "Papa, I asked for more," and they said that they can't. Sadly, my son came with a magazine, and he found this ad saying Chicago City Day School, the culture of kindness with the rigorous academics. And I said, I feel something about it. So we got in contact with them, and since the moment that they called us and we had the initial interview to meet each other, I felt in my heart that was one of those 2 or 3 changes in the life of your family that will go into a different direction. So we jumped into it. So we decided, people call us crazy, we decided this is the way to go. My kids interviewed here. They fit on what they were looking for, and for us was a bliss that also they fit our ethos in regards of our family. So here we are. We moved from Naperville to a small apartment into downtown Chicago, Lakeview, very close. But the challenges that we had at the beginning, because this is 1 year after we moved, were completely so fast. My kids are little professionals, little individuals that talk the way that you see the cadre of amazing students here, with words that I have never even used, with critical thinking that actually they end up teaching us as parents to be better parents. And this is just one example, a small sample of what they have over here. So I felt, I have been touched by God. I felt it every single day. But knowing that my kids are here, surrounded by the amazing people in the back, amazing administration and the parents, it's sometimes surreal.
Yes.
I'm curious for the parents who have their kids come in at the JK or SK age, what was that transition like? I mean, I love the academic rigor. I'm not sure how appropriate that is for that age of kid or the transition into it. Can you tell me a little bit about what that transition in was like for your kids?
My oldest came in right at the end of JK during the pandemic. We were looking for a school for SK, and this school did such a great job with all the protocols and everything. We asked for could we actually sign her up for the last few months of school, and they took her. But there was no issue with that. And then I have a JK that just came in, and she's like my pandemic kid, where she had no socialization other than siblings from 18 months till just last year. And that's also been lovely. I think it's because it's a small class. They've become friends so quickly. And all the kids are so wonderful and nice and sweet.
But it's been a remarkably easy transition. The only thing I'd add on the transition front is that the rigor of academics, interestingly, it's all play-based for the kids in JKSK, right? Everything they're doing is play-based. But teachers are hyper attuned to the degree to which they're playing in certain ways they're accretive to the things that they're most interested in and where they may have certain learning and or developmental gaps. And there's no rigor or demand that a JK or an SK is explicitly reading, but her teachers have very much catered to the fact that she's excited about it, and so we'll give her exercises and things she can do in that vein without being prescriptive about saying, we notice that you're reading and therefore here are the things you have to do.
Yes.
You know, the students kind of spoke to this, but as much as we all like to think we're raising little geniuses, we know that our students will encounter some gaps in their learning or some educational difficulties. As a parent, how have you felt City Days helped your child in the classroom, and then helped equip you to support your child through any academic challenges that you have?
As I mentioned, we have 2 boys, 7th and 8th grade, and to your question, one of the things that we truly appreciated about the school is just how much individual attention our boys get, and how the faculty are able to translate to us as parents how our children are doing in a true sense, in terms of where they're progressing really well, where there may be some gaps, or where they're a bit slower to progress. I think the thing we've appreciated the most has been the strength-based focus through those conversations. It's never been, because we've been to many schools, we lived internationally, and so we have quite a range of references. It hasn't been that kind of, you're behind on maths, your son's behind on maths, you guys need to go and fix this, and come back when it's fixed, because we've been in those situations before. This has been much more a conversation of, look, we're seeing some phenomenal progress in these spaces of maths. We're seeing phenomenal progress in this part of the curriculum. If we're able to kind of translate that into this particular piece, whether it be algebra or something else, we think your son can have a breakthrough. And here's what we think support would look like at home, and here's what we're doing in the school. How do you guys feel about this? It's been a conversation. And I think the way it manifested itself was probably most notably in 4th grade with our oldest one, who's kind of not had the best math aptitude, let's be honest. I think it's an innate ability, but we could debate that. But the interesting thing, and the story I always tell, is when he came home, we had a parent-teacher meeting, he was a bit behind, and he came home and he said, Dad, sit down, watch this, I'm gonna teach you some maths now. I'm gonna show you some advanced level maths that you've never seen before. The greatest confidence in one of the subjects that have been the most difficult for him. And that to me is how the school enables your children to get confidence in an area that may not be their primary strength. And that confidence is worth everything, because they want to continue working on it. And to this day, he's now in 8th grade, and he's really enjoying maths. So it's just incredible how the school is able to kind of have those conversations and keep the connectivity with the parents.
So I would say my kids, they'd be like, can you help me with this? And, you sit and help, and they're like, you're doing it wrong, Mom. I'm like, thank God. Because you know who's good at teaching you is your teachers. And so my kids learn, and many of the high school kids here spoke to this, to talk to their teachers and advocate for themselves, which is huge when your kids get to high school and they're like, I'm struggling and whatever. It's like, we better go talk to the teacher. And my daughter's like, but she's a nun. I'm like, she might be a nun, but she's still a teacher. So you need to go talk to your teacher. And so they really learned that their education is their responsibility. It's not your responsibility, right? It's not, I'm not doing your homework. You're doing your homework. And if you don't understand it, you can go to school with it undone, and you can say, I didn't get it. And your teacher will help you work through that, as opposed to like feeling this pressure that if I don't bring it in and it's not done, I'm in huge trouble. No, if you don't bring it in because it's not done because you didn't try, you're in trouble. But otherwise, if you're trying, your teachers are really helping you. And I think that's just huge when your kid has to advocate for themselves. So my oldest went to St. Ignatius. I went to parent-teacher conferences that were 5 minutes long. I didn't know, I never made a call to the school on my kid's behalf. I never talked to a teacher on my kid's behalf. My kid did that.
Part of something that City Day has taught me is you actually want to know when your child doesn't understand something and is struggling. And so I know with my 3rd grader, the request is don't help them with their homework, because otherwise we don't have a true sense of where they are and what their needs are. And when they are showing that they don't understand something, that's learning, because they take the time then to make sure that they're caught up. And with my older child, who's now in 5th grade, there are tests. They're encouraging them, they're exposing them to kind of increasingly higher stakes. objectives, but it's not like it's ever a surprise. Like they will have worked on it, they will have done the homework, they will have done review, they will spend class time going through those topics over and over again until the time they get to that test. They do well because the teacher and them along the way have known what they need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, we all know in the last few years, and maybe a little beyond that, like things have become a lot more insular. It's a lot harder to kind of get exposure to diversity of thought and experiences. I'm curious how you feel like your kids have been exposed to thinking and experiences other than they have at their home.
This was one of my core questions for Mr. Dow when we were interviewing, because we had a COVID kid, but also I was a Chicago City kid, born and raised. My daughter's father grew up in Amish country, Pennsylvania, going to public school. And like, man, were those different experiences in terms of what would be the ultimate overlay. And City Day historically, I don't mean to say something controversial here, but I don't think was nearly as diverse as it is today. And that, frankly, was a huge consideration point for me as a parent. Was what is the school, because the school is now objectively much more diverse than I understood it to be historically. What's been the precursor to that? How have you thought about doing that thoughtfully and intentionally? I assume it had to have been very intentional. And it's really important to me as a parent and to us as a family that my husband is South African, grew up in Johannesburg. I've lived internationally for much of my postgraduate years. And I want to make sure that our kids are getting exposure to the broadest possible range of perspectives and explicit cultural and racial diversity and diversity of thought, and that's something that's not just sort of tokenism encouraged at a school level, but it's really integrated into the fabric of how the school works. And Mr. Dow may not remember this answer, but it was a great one, which is we have proactively gone out and for the first time started telling the community, this is not a knock on how the school operated historically, but have gone and told the community who we are. We just relied for a long time on the fact that we knew that this was an incredibly special and magical place and didn't do enough to go and proactively encourage it. So you can call it marketing, but we went out and told people what we were doing and what we care about and who we are, and that diversity of thought and explicit diversity has always been embedded in the things that we care about and what we teach our kids. We've now just done a much better job of proactively solving for that diversity.